So we're going to go with our mid-season report cards. We've played school teacher. We're going to be giving them all ratings. It's giving me flashbacks to high school, which I don't really like, but that's okay. Well,
Well, these guys will have much higher marks than what I got in high school,
oh
so
yeah.
it's not so much to worry about.
Do you want to kick us off with Holdsworth? Because we're just going to do the top 10. We didn't want to do the entire championship. We're going to actually no. We're going to start off with a few
Yeah,
people
we
outside of
had
the top 10.
we had a few outside the top 10, just
Mm.
to the few that sort of stood out for good and bad. There were some that have been performing above their weight for the teams that they're in. Others not so much. So for all the ones that we don't mention, they've sort of just got like a default C.
Mm.
That's a pass. They got a they could be better, could be worse. If you don't hear their name, it's because they got a C. But we start off. I had young Heingartner in Nissan. He's been their best performer all year. Like he's been fairly consistently in the top 10. He's at times challenged for a podium as well. I think he deserves a much better car than what he has at the moment. And for me, I'll give him a B plus.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been pretty impressed with Heimgartner as well, and I agree with your B plus rating. He's really dragged that Nissan up in some of the races. You can see that occasionally Kelly has been there as well, but not as much as Heimgartner. He's been really outperforming the car, I think, and he's probably going to be hot property come the silly season.
Yeah, I think so. As soon as his contract's up, he will be one of those drivers that surely have to find a more competitive drive.
Definitely.
He might even be on the Tickford radar too if Chaz were to leave.
What's your next driver? Because
We
I have a
went.
few.
We went. I've gone for Winterbottom. He actually just sneaks above a pass. I've given him a C plus. Started off so well. He was the first driver to break the McLaughlin run of poles and get a pole position back in Tassie. Just missed out on a podium there as well. He showed really good pace early, but since Phillip Island, or even including Phillip Island, he's really been back in the midfield or even lower at sometimes. There's a couple of times where he's been unlucky, but I think for him, unfortunately, we've mentioned it before that his fortunes are entwined with Triple Eights, and if they're not doing well, then he's not doing well. So unfortunately, it's sort of a case of they could do better. I think he's just trucking along at the moment, hoping that they can improve the car. But I think it's also the downside of having a one-car team as well. Even though it is still they are still closely linked to Triple Eight, it's still essentially a one-car team, and it's always tough to really develop a car over the course of a season if it's just you fighting on your own.
Yeah, I agree with you. I probably would almost lean towards a B minus, but quite close to the same rating.
Yeah, pretty much.
Winterbottom, obviously, as you're saying, has great pace. This at the beginning of the season, especially considering that he was in a new car and a new team. We really harped on about that at the beginning of the year. Really hoped he was going to be up there challenging, but unfortunately just fell away as Triple Eight did. But I still think he's performing well. Even though he has got a few bad results, I still think he's performing well enough to be impressive at least, considering the circumstances that he's in. But yeah, and you've got your final one, which is I'll leave that to you.
Yeah.
Your final driver.
Yeah. Well, it's poor old Richie Stanaway. Wow, what a letdown! Really, I credit it would still pants me if we jumped in a car and
Yes.
tried to race him. It's just pure armchair expert stuff. But for me, he can't get any better than an E minus. Like on an A to F score scale, it's pretty close to a complete failure. Really, it's he moved from Tickford last year after he really failed to set the world on fire. A lot of blame on the car not being competitive. I would happily give him that because the car wasn't competitive last year, and he was still trying to learn and everything like that. But we'd seen the year before when he won the Sandown 500 with Waters that he performed really well that day. So when if the car was okay, like he does a good job in it. Bathurst, they led for a big chunk of that year. And then last year, it really wasn't that great. And then this year, we thought, he's moved to Gary Rogers Motorsport. He bought the Boost sponsorship with him. That was sort of the deal, that Boost were happy to fund the team, but they wanted Stanaway in the car. It meant Tander had to find another ride somewhere else. Wasn't able to do it. It would be at Triple Eight with the Enduros, but he's barely done anything good since then. He's out of the main drivers that have competed at every round, or up until he had to pull out with injury. He's running dead last. So not a good thing to be doing that, especially if you're highly rated as he is. I think just the results don't live up to the hype is basically what it is. And we've seen even Chris Pither was when he stepped in for that first race at Winton, he got their best result for the season. So for having not had any real seat time at all, so to me that's just where it ends for them, is why he's got an E-.
Yeah, I'd definitely agree with you on that. I think his driving style probably just suits single-seaters better, honestly, because all of his good results, I was looking previously, have come in single-seater racing, and I think that's where he should have stuck, really, because clearly he's not going great. He's probably still an awesome driver, but it just doesn't suit him in the supercars. Obviously, they're difficult cars to drive, and they're really not like anything that you can compare to. Like, you see when international drivers come over, they say they're so difficult to drive. So yeah, but what's interesting is that Pither wasn't too far away from surpassing Richie Stenaway in points after only just one round or 2 rounds. So that's probably why Pither's been kicked out of the car, and then they're putting Caruso in, so Richie Stenaway doesn't get completely embarrassed.
Yeah, that's right. But and suppose to his defence a little bit, I don't think the Gary Rogers car this year is overly fast. But his teammate, who doesn't have a lot of experience either, is beating him fairly well at the moment. Obviously he's had a couple of extra rounds to score points at, but he just has not set the world alight since he entered supercars, and it doesn't seem to be improving at the moment. A lot of people have blamed his attitude towards a lot of things. It's the old motorsport adage of it's never the driver's fault. They'll always find something else to blame. I think he really tries to find something else to blame, which I think led to him losing those rides over in Europe in the single seaters over there in GP2. So unfortunately for him, unless he's able to turn it around, he might be relying on sponsorship to keep him in the sport.
Yeah, well, he's competed in 24 Hours of Le Mans before. He's clearly a pretty competent driver, but yeah, as you're saying, he needs to change his attitude and try to get some better results. Moving on to my ones outside of the top 10, I've put literally the guy just outside the top 10, which is Tim Slade. I've given him a B+ because he's performing very well with Brad Jones Racing. Brad Jones Racing has really stepped up their game massively, and Slade has stepped up as well. In previous few years, he's just kind of been making up the numbers a bit, but this year he's really been a standout, and as I was going through the results last night, throughout the season so far, he's been consistently up there, and he's been consistently challenging within the top 10, if not the top 5. So it's been pretty awesome to see, I guess, a smaller team and a smaller driver as well really stepping up.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you consider him just a genuine mid-pack runner. Now he's actually stepping up and starting to finish inside the top 10 more. That's you like to see that improvement in drivers, and it just again improves the racing, which is always what we want as fans. So yeah, I think that marks pretty much spot on for him.
So on to our top 10. We're starting off just from 10th position running all the way through the first. Do you want to start us off with Holdsworth?
I will, and yeah. So for Lee Holdsworth, he gets a C plus, and he's So it could have been a bit better, but he's had such a slow start. Like for a long time, we only almost felt like there was 5 Mustangs on the grid, and then Holdsworth further back. He was not having a good time of it. Starting to doubt just how much talent the guy had. I knew he had plenty. We'd seen it in the past, but then I thought, well, where's it gone? He just has no pace. But just in the last few rounds, he's really started to switch it on, and he's started to really creep up the grid. Like I think so. Certainly from Winton onwards, it's been a much better performance. Even in Perth, we started to see it a little bit there too, but definitely Winton onwards, we started to see more pace from him. So if it wasn't for that turnaround, he probably would have been down around a good D or D minus perhaps. But he gets a C plus, so it's definitely a pass plus that he gets, just because he started to turn that form around and show the pace that we know the Mustangs had all year with the other drivers.
Yeah, he's obviously he didn't have the most consistent run at the beginning of the season, as you're saying, but yeah, I've been pretty impressed with him since about Winton also. But looking on to 9th place, we have Davison. I've given him a B minus. He's another guy in a Mustang that probably should be performing better, given how fast we can see that the Mustangs can go. Whether that's down to the team or the driver, can't really say. But he had a really promising beginning to the season, but he had a really major slump in Melbourne after a few issues. But he returned to form a little bit come Phillip Island and Perth, but then he was just inconsistent again in the latter half of the last few rounds. It'll be interesting to see whether he can actually outperform Holdsworth, though, considering they're in the same machinery. But they aren't.
They're very close on points, too.
Yeah, very close on points. They're both in the same boat where they're not really quite on top of the Mustang just yet. So it'll be interesting to see who can get on top of it first.
Yeah, that's right. Like out of that, they're one of only a couple of teams that have more than 2 cars in the grid, so it's always good to see that inter-team battle between the 4 drivers. And so, they have their own little Tickford Cup, and he's had some really good races. Again, he was really unlucky to not be in contention for that podium back in Darwin. The team made the error, so that wasn't his fault. But after that, he sort of, it sounds going to sound bad, but he kind of threw the toys out of the cot, because he really was not on the pace after that. He knew he had his penalty, and after that he sort of just gone, whatever. He'll just started pacing around. Exactly. When, I know he's not going for a championship this year, but you'd still want him to push hard. And, he might have just been able to stick out and at least cross the line third and be morally in 3rd place.
Yeah. Even
though he was going to cop 15 seconds for it and probably drop back to 7th or 8th, but. We know the Mustang's pretty quick, and so he could have stayed in front of a lot of other guys had he have still put in an effort. So to me, I just thought like it probably wasn't the best show from him after he got that penalty. But I'd like to see him do better, because we know the car can do more. But whether it's the exact same quality of car as we see the likes of Waters and Chaz have either as well. So, but yeah, I think that's a pretty fair mark for him.
Next up, you got Percat.
We got Nick Percat next. So, just got a straight B for him. He's easily Brad Jones Racing's top performer. He's solid in the they're a pretty solid midfield team, and he's running inside the top 10. So, and well inside the top 10. So that's a fair effort from him. I think he's definitely getting the most out of that Commodore.
Didn't seem to have like a great season last year, but he's definitely improved on his driving performance. A lot of people last year were saying he just wasn't a talented driver, or he was just didn't have the right attitude, but it seems he's really matured this year. But I think a lot of people still expect a lot from him because his first outing was basically winning the Bathurst 1000. So
Yeah.
when he came into full-time season the next year, a lot of people expected a lot for him.
Yeah, that's it. You can't win all your races. You've started off with a massive high.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty hard to match that. So, yeah, I can see where like a lot of people are saying, like, does he really have the talent to be one of the top drivers in supercars? I guess you won't know unless he can get a top drive. And it's the same for a lot of drivers. Like, even like Stanaway, we gave him an E minus, but throw him in a DJR car. If he was running second in the championship, he would probably have a B. So
exactly.
A lot of it's still going to come down to the car they're in. But when you see drivers outperforming their car, then they're going to they're going to turn a lot of heads doing it. So
exactly. I think also, just going back to that Bathurst win, a lot of that was really just Garth Tander and then also the luck as well. It's a bit like when Chas Mostert and Paul Morris won. Paul Morris didn't win it, Chas Mostert won it, really. In the end, yeah. I just didn't like that Bathurst win at all. Happy for Chas Mostert, not so much Paul Morris.
Well, it was just one of those bizarre ones of like, Paul Morris, Bathurst winner, but it's like
something you'd never expected to see ever.
It's still kind of a little bit more Chas, but like, it was probably the most exciting finish to a Bathurst ever. Like,
exactly.
But again, it was Chas behind the wheel at that moment, not Paul Morris. Paul Morris probably just would have turned him around 3 laps earlier, punted him into the wall, got a drive through, and whoever was in third won the race.
Whenever I think of, like, if you go to, like, his Wikipedia page, most of the highlights will probably just be, he won the Bathurst 1000. And I just think of when he ran the Cyril May Wines Commodore, the number 67, and whenever you saw that Commodore, you're like, oh no, here we go. It's like goes to the Zinger replay, as it was called back then, and it's Paul punting someone off. So, but anyway,
it was handy way back when. I think he was in the Diet Coke BMW. He was pretty handy driver back in those days, but once it came across the supercars, it probably wasn't quite the same. But again, he never had a top drive either.
Exactly.
I think his probably biggest highlight, apart from winning Bathurst, would be when he was nailed by Mark Larkham when he was in the Big Kev Commodore at Oran Park.
At Oran Park.
And absolutely annihilated both cars.
Jesus, that was terrifying.
Massive fireball. So that's probably behind Bathurst his next biggest career highlight.
We also do reviews of past drivers as well, guys. That's what we're doing now.
Yeah, that's it. We've gone off on our own tangent again, but
next,
so I think that's Percat. So I think we go back to you now.
On to Waters. So Waters showed massive promise of taking the battle to the front runners at the beginning of season, but unfortunately just dropped away after a couple rounds. He's slowly been back up the front again after Perth at the Super Night, but I don't think he really quite has the pace to challenge the top 5. He is still quite a young driver compared to some of the guys that are up the front. He's obviously running the same equipment as Mostert, and he was beating Mostert to begin with, but he's just the inconsistency, as is the buzzword for this, is inconsistency. So, he just hasn't been quite there, but I think he has potential to possibly be challenging Red Bull if they stay on this poor form.
Yeah, well, that's right. So, what was your mark for him in the end again?
Oh, sorry, I gave Waters a B-. You
gave him a B-. So, it was, and that's sort of, it's been a little bit of a diamonds or rocks season for him. He's had some podiums and he's had some really good results, but then in amongst that, some really ordinary ones as well, and that's the story of the top 10, and ultimately what's allowing McLaughlin to run away with it at the moment is that there's no 1 or 2 drivers really sticking to him. Everybody else is having poor results in amongst their good ones, and Waters, it's good to see him up on the podium more. I was starting to think that maybe he was a little bit of a one-hit wonder after Sandown a couple of years ago, because last year he certainly didn't set the season alight for himself. But but this year definitely he's turned things around. Obviously the car's a lot better as well. But it's good to see him get some good results. Just you'd like to see more of it again.
So next up we have Win Cup, and that's you've got Win Cup for this one.
Yes, so Win Cup. Yeah, for me, I've gone a B minus for that one. He's up and down start to the season. Like Adelaide, he was okay. He was okay again in Melbourne. A couple of podiums in Adelaide, so it's a decent start there. Then he had some rotten luck as well, but then some ordinary drives in amongst that as well. So an up and down start to the season. Obviously, the car has been probably the biggest issue this year. We keep on harping on about it, but they've been impacted worse than any other team with the twin spring. Really have not reacted great to it. But since then, I think he's really started to outperform the pace of the car. Like we've seen in Darwin, both times he qualified poorly, and he managed to get it up and get a couple of fifth place finishes. And you'd be mistaken to thinking that their car was probably almost the second fastest in behind the DJR Mustang. So if they could qualify better, it would be an interesting race. Like they're really holding high hopes for Townsville. That'll be interesting to see if they have turned a corner. Obviously the couple of teams in front of them don't want that. But it'd be good for the championship if they became a bit of a three-way fight for race wins all of a sudden, or four-way fight if you throw in Tickford. But yeah, Win Cup, I think he started to outperform the car. He's certainly outperforming his teammate at the moment, even though he's behind him on the championship ladder at the moment. But he's closing in fast, and I think it may only be a matter of time before he overtakes him.
Yeah, I've only given him a C plus, but we'll average it out to a B minus. We'll bring him up a little bit. But I think it's really just Win Cups initially with the poor performance of the Red Bull. He kind of was like in a bit of shock, considering he's mostly driven really good cars when he's with Triple Eight, besides from when he was with GOM way back in the day. He probably doesn't even remember driving those cars. But yeah, he's probably was just shocked that he wasn't that fast. So now I think he's starting to adapt to like a car that isn't as fast as he's used to. So he's really starting to learn how to really muscle the car. So I think he's going alright. As you're saying, he's been outperforming Van Gisbergen. A little bit of a segue into Van Gisbergen then, who I've given just a straight C, because initially I thought he was going to be the main challenger to McLaughlin and Coulthard, but after a really terrible run in Melbourne, which was obviously where he got the driveline failure, I think it was, didn't even make he had an issue after his pit stop with the driveline failure, so obviously that can't be helped. But he just really didn't make up the lost ground after that. He got the double podium in Tasmania, where we thought, here we go, it's he's back on it again, but then he just slipped away again. So like really the early season stumble really set him back. But I don't think he really is going to bother the top three in the championship that often. He might do in the races, but I don't think he'll get there in the championship.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think that's a pretty fair result for him as a C. Like it's a pass mark. He's doing well enough in the car, given that the car's not that great. But unlike his teammate, he's not outperforming it either. He is the only Holden winner this year, so that definitely speaks for something there. That he managed to get up for a win in Tassie. But that was a track that wasn't going to be overly favourable towards the Mustang because it doesn't have the same flow and speed that some of the other ones had. And this was before the aero adjustments that we've since seen as well. But so credit to him for that. He got Holden's only win this year, but really he has not gone that well. Darwin particularly last time out, he qualified poor, didn't race much better. He only sort of just scraped into the top 10 on both of those races, I think. So it's not going that well for him. Whether he's sort of just on the verge of just coasting around, he's prepared to ride off this season. He'll just do his best without trying to outperform too much. Again, not the attitude you ideally want to see. You still want to see him pushing for wins and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They may have the bigger picture of perhaps Bathurst on their mind, that they're just looking at setting the car up, where they can doing what work they can to try and have a bullet for Bathurst. We'll wait and see what happens there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like you said, I don't think he's going to be climbing up the ladder too much at the moment. If anything, he might slide back one or two more spots, but there's still enough pace in that car that he's still definitely going to finish in the 10. He'll be hovering around that top 5 by season's end, I would think, unless there's a massive turnaround for Triple Eight's fortunes. But I think he's just not having the season that he ideally wanted.
So next we've got Mostert, which is your one.
Yeah, so Mostert, I've given him just a B. He's performing well. He's the only other winner besides Van Gisbergen outside of the DJR pairing. He's topping the Tickford Cup at the moment out of those drivers, and he is doing a pretty solid job for them. But again, like that keyword that we keep saying is the inconsistency. He's had some great results, some second places and third places, the one race win so far. But then, we see mistakes like what we've seen back at the start of the season with Adelaide, when he was all over the back of Van Gisbergen and would just put some silly moves on that you would expect a rookie to make. And he's been around in supercars for quite some time now and has won some really good races by driving well. And then he's thrown away some good results this year by driving poor. And you'd think, based on how good he's been driving, you'd think he should easily be sitting in third in the championship at the moment, with a bit of margin, perhaps even as second, given Coulthard's troubles as well, which we'll touch on shortly. But I think he should be better than what he is, and he is sort of lucky to get a B. He probably would have got a B minus if I was to be a bit harsh, just for the mistakes he's made. But his good results have helped him out a lot.
So next up is Reynolds, who I've given an A minus. He's probably been my top performer of the season. The only reason I've given him an A minus is because there's 2 other cars in front of him, so you can't quite give him an A plus. But he really has been the best of the rest outside of the DJR cars. And he's done it all in a car and a team. So he's done it all in a car from one of the smaller teams, which is really impressive. And he's the top Holden driver as well, and he's obviously beating out the 2 Red Bull Holden Racing teams cars. And I'm just really impressed. Obviously, Penrite Racing Erebus/Penrite have really stepped up their game massively, because we saw Di Pasquale up there at the beginning of the season, but unfortunately he slipped away. But Reynolds has been really the most consistent outside of McLaughlin, and he's really been one of the top performers for this season.
Yeah, that's right. I probably would have been a touch more harsh and just gone a B plus, but I'm happy with an A minus as well. He's outperformed the car. Although I think the car is very good, so he's just getting the most out of the car, I guess, is probably the more correct way of saying it. And to be the leading Holden driver I think that's it speaks a lot for him as a driver. But he's just in a really good place with that team. Every time you see something about him or the team, everyone just loves doing what they're doing, and you can see that why they're getting the results that they're getting.
Yeah.
Obviously, they'd love just Di Pasquale to be further up the pecking order as well, but not to be at the moment. But Reynolds, we've known for a long time that he's a good driver. It's good to see him in third and pushing the DJR cars. I only went a little bit harsher because he has had a few poorer results through the year where you thought he probably should have done a little bit better, but everyone's entitled to a couple of bad days out, I guess, as well. So,
especially
I think,
this season.
Yeah, that's it. Out of all of the drivers that we've said are inconsistent, he would probably be the least inconsistent out of those. Out of a lot of those guys.
He's been the most consistent inconsistent.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so If we had a shot for every time that we had to say inconsistent
We
this
wouldn't
year,
make it to
we
the
would
end.
be very drunk. We'd be so drunk. Yeah. So, but yeah, he's driving well, and it's good to see him keeping the DJR cars honest.
Next up we got Coulthard, which is your go.
Yeah. So we got Coulthard. He's just a standard B, a straight B for me. So he's been solid all year, really. Like, when a lot of talk whether or not he'd still have his seat at the end of the season. Last year was a pretty big disappointment. Last year you would have been flat out giving him any more than a D for his season, but this year he's really stepped it up. He's got a couple of race wins, a few other podiums to go along with it. Considering that he started the year poor, he had issues back in Adelaide. Melbourne was a little bit better for him as well, but he's made a couple of mistakes along the way, and he's had a bit of luck, reliability, bad luck, reliability wise as well. So to bounce back and be now second, when at one stage he was outside the top five. I think like even Melbourne, I think he had a tangling with Van Gisbergen and dropped him way outside the top 15. So
Yeah.
the way he's been able to bounce back and now be, even though he's still well over 300 points behind McLaughlin, he's got a bit of a gap back to Reynolds now too. So he's earned that gap through much better consistency, much better results over the past few rounds.
I think a lot of people are still critical of Coulthard, considering that McLaughlin and him are obviously in the same car, not different setups obviously, but the same car, same team kind of thing, and it's really cast a light on Fabian. It's like, so why aren't you finishing as good as McLaughlin is? But obviously McLaughlin has been forming incredibly consistent this year, and that's why I've given him an A. Won 12 of the 16 races. Only reason I haven't given him an A+ is because he hasn't won 4 of them. He hasn't won every single race, so you can't quite give him an A+. But really, there isn't much to say except he's just being incredibly dominant, and he's just run away with the season. We're at the halfway point, and he's got over 300 points advantage over the next car, and that's his teammate. I don't think we've seen this kind of domination for years, really.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's going to be one of those record-breaking years. On current form, things can change. 2017 was sort of that, or even last year a bit too. Scott McLaughlin had a pretty decent lead going into Townsville, and Triple Eight were able to turn it around and really close the gap back down. It's certainly a long way from sealed at this stage. Again, one really poor weekend, and that gap comes right back down in a hurry too. So by no means you can rest on your laurels yet, but yeah, it's just been incredible. Like to have the number of wins he's had. Look, he's already smashed his best season as far as race wins are concerned, and we're halfway through the season.
Yeah.
He's only 4 wins away from equaling Craig Lowndes' record of 16 wins in a season. That could go by Bathurst.
Yeah.
And there'll still be several races left in the season. He's will likely, you'd think, break his own record again of pole positions in a year, even though for a long time we only used to have one qualifying session for the whole weekend. So those records are always going to be pretty skewed anyway. But for the last few years, when we've had a lot more qualifying sessions, like one for each race, more or less, he's been the standout performer in that. And so if he's going to beat his own record again, it looks like that's on the money. He's just on another planet, and I don't think there's anything like, his worst finish this year has been 4th. And if that's the worst...
He had a DNF, though.
Oh, yeah, he did have the DNS, I should say, for
DNS,
that one. But, again, if you gave him the likely what would have been 70 points that he probably would have got for that race, because he started on pole, was to start on pole, like it would have been an even bigger lead. So it's probably ended up being a little bit of a good thing that it's at least kept 70 points off of him, I guess, in a way there. But
if Triple Eight or like a different team manages to win the championship by 70 points, there's definitely going to be conspiracy theories about Cam Waters being paid to take out
Yeah,
McLaughlin,
that's it.
especially if it's Triple Eight.
Yeah, that's right. I get but like we'll go through a couple of the teams very shortly. But it's yeah, like it'd be very hard for anyone to if he doesn't have any dramas, it'd be very hard for someone to start chasing him down. Like he could, I think, as long as he sort of keeps finishing on the podium or very close for the rest of the season, I think the championship's pretty much done and dusted.
Yeah, it's so my team that I've gone for, I've only just rated the one team. I've gone for Brad Jones Racing with a B plus. So usually we're used to Brad Jones Racing just being a midfield team, basically have been since the beginning of their time. But they've really stepped it up massively this year, and it's great to see. Obviously, Percat, as we touched on earlier, in ninth, and then Tim Slade in 11th. So Percat was in 8th. Sorry, Percat's 8th. Slade is 11th. So really, really good performance by Brad Jones Racing, especially considering their budget. Obviously, we don't know their budget, but obviously they're quite a bit of a smaller team. They're really not a massive factory team. I'd say they're like one of the last teams that isn't owned by like a massive corporation, besides from like Gary Rogers Motorsport. There wouldn't really be that many that aren't like owned by a bigger company. Like we got
have big sponsorship, yeah.
Yeah, we've got like Triple Eight Race Engineering. And then we've obviously got DJR Team Penske. DJR would have been counted as a smaller team previously, but now that they're with Team Penske, I'd count them as obviously they're a massive team now. Then Walkinshaw Andretti United, obviously. And then there's a couple other smaller teams, but they're really outperforming their budget this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, that's it. And like, no doubt their drivers, probably have to help provide some of that sponsorship. They'd be probably a long way from being the highest paid drivers on the grid, but yeah, they're a genuine mid-pack team, and to have a couple of drivers in and right around the top 10, I think is a pretty fair result. They're outperforming what the car's probably capable of, even though I don't think the car's certainly bad in any way. But I think they've always been one of those teams that punch above their weight at times, and it's good to see a couple of their drivers doing well. A couple of their other drivers too are still quite young and don't have the experience yet, so they can be forgiven for not having all of their drivers up towards the pointy end too. Yeah. So I guess they're doing a good job.
What teams have you reviewed?
I brought up a few. So the first one I thought was Kelly Racing Team. Heingarten has really sort of been the only shining light for them this year. Otherwise, they've been quite poor. I know it's tough on them that Nissan's now pulled out. They've had to try and find, income from otherwise, which is what we've been touching on. That there are quite a few teams starting to struggle a bit more now in supercars, and Kelly Racing's probably one of those. Poor Caruso had to step out of the team this year because they needed, he probably wasn't able to get the same budget together for himself to race. We know that racing's obviously quite expensive. So like Simona Di Silvestro, she's got quite a large deal with Harvey Norman that helped bring in funding to the team, that sort of stuff. So. It is tough for them. They're up against it, but you would have thought that, there's always been times where they've been able to do well throughout the season. We haven't really seen that apart from Heingartner this year, but to me they've only got a D- because I think they're without that funding now they're just making up the numbers in a sense. They're not really doing that well. Like Simona. She's sort of only been a bit of a mid-pack driver for most of that time. It's great to have her on the grid. I really hope that, she can hang around for a few more years. Hopefully, she can get a more competitive drive somewhere. Whether that's with Kelly Racing, I'm not sure, but you'd love to see her with a much faster car, so she can really show what she's got. But yeah, so Kelly Racing for me, unfortunately, gets a D-. I don't know if you've got, agree or disagree with that one.
I'd say probably about a D, but yeah, D-.
Yeah.
I'd also just have to put in there that also Kelly has had a few good results in there.
He has had a few,
but it's always...
You would expect him to finish up towards the pointy end more.
Yeah.
He is supposed to be one of the better drivers on the grid as well. But
I think also Kelly's almost like the same age as Lowndes, isn't he?
He is starting to get up there. He still sounds like he's 12, but he's...
Yes.
But I think he is one of the older drivers on the grid now. I think behind... I think James Courtney's the oldest.
Is he?
I think Courtney's the oldest.
That makes me feel really old.
Yeah.
I remember when James Courtney debuted. Jesus.
Yeah, that's it. So he, I think I think Kelly's younger, but not by a lot. Because again, he got what was it, 2006 when he won his championship. So you're looking at 12 years ago now, or 13 years ago now. So a long time ago.
We got to do a 2006 season review.
Yeah, we will eventually get there. So we'll definitely do that one and include Bathurst. So for the Lowndes fans, it'll be heartbreak and joy all in the one review. So.
What was your next team?
So I had also Walkinshaw Andretti United. So for me, another D-. And we touched on this when we're talking about whether or not it would be a good idea for Chaz to go there. They've been on the slow decline for a long, long time, and things don't look like they're improving. I think at the moment their drivers are around 15th and 17th or something like that. Courtney's sort of just outperforming Pye. They just haven't looked likely all year. The cars don't seem to have any real pace, and they don't seem to have any real answers as to why they don't have any pace. So, and even in some of their other poorer years, they've still at times had some decent moments. Still managed to grab a win here or a couple of podiums there, and just jagged that one good weekend where they, everyone remembers the good old days of HRT. We haven't seen any signs of that this year, so unfortunately for them, it's not improving. Like I don't want to count previous seasons, but when you've seen that trajectory going the wrong direction, it's not good signs ahead for them unless they're able to turn it around in a hurry.
I think really just since HRT dropped their backing, it's just continued to go downhill. It's interesting because they're pouring so much money into that. Obviously, they've got Walkinshaw, Andretti, and United Autosports. Yeah.
Yep.
All backing them, and they just can't get the results. So you wonder how much longer they're gonna have that kind of funding. Considering that they've been on board for a few years. It's it reminds me of McLaren in Formula One a bit. They're even like the same entity.
Because they only sort of hooked up as it is now. Back in I think it was 2016 was when that started. So only a year after DJR.
Yeah.
And since then, they've only a couple of years after that. DJR nearly won a championship. They won the team's championship. Then they won the drivers' championship the year after. They're smashing it this year, where Walkinshaw seem to have still gone backwards. So
I remember when like that was all announced. That we were going to have Penske and then technically like the McLaren company coming in. That's how it was dubbed anyway. They had all the clickbaity headlines, but I remember being really excited for that season because I thought, wow, this is going to be a massive change of scene, but obviously it's just been DJRT and Penske that's been on the up. What's the next team that you have?
I've got Red Bull Racing. It'd be hard not to mention one of the teams that's fallen off the perch a little bit this year. Obviously the spring changes have impacted them more than anybody else, and I think for them, like they started off well because some of the other teams hadn't quite come up to speed, so their results may have been a bit inflated by the poor start by others. I still think they've gotten better throughout the season, but other teams have gotten better faster. So
yeah.
Where Brad Jones Racing's improved a bit, and at times has been sort of on pace with them, sort of still a little bit behind, generally still behind, but then we've seen, Tickford have definitely come on stronger throughout the course of the season, even though they've still had that inconsistency that we've talked about. But they've definitely improved. Erebus have definitely been the biggest improver out of any of the teams, mainly through Reynolds, but so they've come on strong there as well. So, at the moment, they're still sitting second in the in the teams championship, amazingly. But then when you look at what Tickford are doing behind, they've got Mostert's paired up with Holdsworth and Waters is paired up with Davison, so they have the sort of, with all due respect to Davison and Holdsworth, but they've got the two stronger drivers paired with the two weaker drivers, not the two top performers together. So it's a little bit weird that way. So it's I guess that's probably holding them back in the teams championship side of things. I know it doesn't have the same glamour as the drivers championship, obviously, but I still would have thought that I'd like to crunch the numbers. I might have to do that prior to Townsville and the next podcast, but I'll see where Tickford might be if they had a Chaz Mostert, Cameron Waters.
A better pairing.
Yeah, better, or at least the two better performers at the moment, and see where that would have them in the teams championship.
It's interesting the way that they've split it up. I'm just looking at it now. It's really strange that they would do that like that, because surely they would know prior to the season who were going to be their top drivers, and surely they'd pair it together to try and get the best optimal result.
Yeah, I would have thought so. It probably comes down to, because I know the 23 red car, like Davison's cars, it's not really their car. Technically they're a 3-car team, but they run the Davison's car out of their factory. Just someone else owns the RAC for it. So it still kind of is a 4-car team in a sense. But I remember after when Frosty won the 2015 championship, and the Pepsi left the team, and you suddenly say you had Chaz in the super cheap car, Frosty got the Bottle car. You actually had Frosty and Waters paired together, and Chaz moved down and was in his own garage.
Yeah,
not part of it, and that's when I think that really hurt the team more than they thought it was going to, because I think you needed them side by side, even though they can share all the data they want. Everything's there, but I think when you're side by side, you're right there, and you get out of the car and Frosty can turn straight to Chaz and say, "How's this going?" And Chaz can turn straight back to Frosty and say, "How's that going?" I think that was one of their big reasons why they took a massive step back that year, was because they weren't in the same garage, and I think that could be partly the reason why they might be struggling at times this year as well. And I think also why, going back to Frosty, even though he's got all of he's got all that Triple Eight equipment, he's got access to all their data, everything like that, they've got access to his. So in a sense, it's a little bit like a 3-car team, but because Frosty's not able to get out of the car and immediately talk to Van Gisbergen and say, "What are we doing here?" I think that's what's hurting Frosty as well. Is you don't have that teammate to help push you along.
It's like what happened to Craig Lowndes last year when he had his own Lowndes Racing. As soon as I saw that they had announced that, I'm like, well, I guess Craig Lowndes isn't going to be up the front this year, because it's just bad. It's years ago, I just know Lowndes quotes off the top of my head, but he said years ago when he was with FPR, back when they were a 3-car team, I think.
Yep. Yeah, they had 3 cars for a while.
He was the 3rd car in that team as well. I think it was the 00. I think.
That was back in the Gibson Motorsport days. It became 00 Motorsport.
Oh no, sorry. When he was with FPR, he had the 3-car team, and he said that it's just terrible being the 3rd car, because there's literally just a wall in between you, and it's like, oh, can I go in there or not? That's
like it. You're in the same team, but you're sort of not in a way. It's very strange. I think that was back when he was in the Caterpillar car.
Oh yes, the number 6.
You would have had so we would have had Glenn Seaton, and I think it was Bernard.
Yeah, and they were
may have been the other FPR car back then.
But he was Yeah, because there was the two blue FPR cars, wasn't there? Back
Yeah,
then.
he ran the Caterpillar car, so
Yeah, so
he may have been in the garage by himself, and
it
then
even
it's
looked
just
different.
that's it. So it's he would have had all the same equipment, and it wasn't a bad car. It wasn't Stone Brothers spec car back in those days, but that's what I mean. When you're trying to run a car like that, it doesn't always work out. And well, going back to Red Bull, that I think that's why they're straight. I think even then, I think they've also underestimated how much of an impact Lowndes' retirement may have had too, because
Yeah.
his experience in supercars is obviously immense, and I think they do miss him more than they realise. I guess the truth's always probably going to be a little bit hidden as to just how, like, if he did properly retire, or if he was slightly shoved out the door. We don't know for sure. It was actually almost a year ago that he announced his retirement. It was
Bill, a year ago this weekend.
Yeah, that's right. So it was almost a full year since that announcement. So, so I think that it's been a few things for Red Bull this year. They've been good at times, but then other teams have outdeveloped them along the way, and I think Lowndes' retirement's hurt them more than they realise. The twin springs, not having those anymore, has been the biggest hurt. And then we had Phillip Island, where there was that little bit of infighting that was just, they were starting to blame each other for certain things.
Yeah.
When it was like, oh, hang on, you're meant to win as a team and you're meant to lose as a team. And, if you're going to lose, do it with a bit of grace, a bit of humility, and find a way to get faster, not just blame that guy, because that's not going to make it better.
Yeah.
At that stage, I'm guessing someone's gone along and kicked their backsides and said, no, we've got to do this properly, because at that weekend I thought, wow, this could really implode and they could really find themselves on the back foot, and guys leave the team and other people get sacked, and they try and hastily recruit people from other teams and that sort of stuff. And thankfully for them, it didn't get to that point, but it would have added to the entertainment if it did. But
the demise of Red Bull.
Yeah, that's it. But like I said in a much earlier podcast too, sometimes all good things just come to an end. They've had such a long time of domination in the sport, where they've won 7 championships out of the last 10, really. And it might just be time now where another team takes that mantle off of them, and they're going to go on a bit of a streak of 2, 3, 4, 5 championships. You'd hope that they don't do it as easily as what they are now, DJR, for the next 4 or 5 years. Otherwise, we're going to have people switching off like they're doing in Formula One at the moment. But
besides from Austria, that was great.
Well, yeah, that was a cracker. I was actually quite gutted for Leclerc. I was cheering him on. I was wanting him to win. Yeah, so the Ferrari man was cheering, but that was a cracker finish. So, and I'm glad they didn't penalise Verstappen. That would have been a stupid way for that result to be handed out. So. But so I think for Red Bull, I think they'll turn it around, no doubt. But they might just be for a couple of years now, they might just be the second favourite or third favourite in the grid, and somebody else will do a bit of winning for a while, and then someone else will step up and do it all over again. It might be Red Bull, they might have 2 or 3 years in the doldrums, but then they step up and start doing it. You see it in footy. Teams have great runs where they finish up the pointy end for a long time, and then they start missing the finals, and they might have to miss the finals for 2 or 3 years before they can rebuild and start playing finals footy again. So, but I think finally, obviously, DJR. Wow, I think simply an A+. I think you can't take anything away from their pace. They have absolutely demolished everybody this year. They've won 10 out of the 12 races. 12 out of the
16.
14 out of 16. I was close in the end, but 14 out of 16. And even the 2 races that they didn't win, I think, Coulthard finished second in the one in Tassie. I forget who finished second in the one in Melbourne, but I don't think it was Coulthard. I think that was actually probably their worst result of the year. I'd have to go back through the list of where they finished, but a stack of podiums, so many of the race wins, heaps of the pole positions. They at times have been half a second faster than the rest of the field, but it is closing in now. Like, they have made those aero changes and that sort of stuff, but they've just got the Mustang hooked up. Even compared to the other Mustang teams, they're light years in front of them, really. So I think it's going to take something special from here to beat them in the teams championship, and probably a lot of luck to go back their way as well. And they'll need some poor luck and poor reliability from DJR's side of things. So I think, it's you never get to want to speak too soon, but it's going to take a bit of a miracle for somebody else to win the teams championship, at least from here.
So obviously, just absolutely dominating. I can never remember it being this dominating before. But what was so?
I think going back to some of the HRT days, there was a lot there where between Scaife and Lowndes, Scaife and Bright in there as well for a while. You had there were years where HRT were really dominating, getting a lot of the wins there as well. But it's been quite a while since we've seen one team dominate this much as well. So, like I said, it's going to take something special from here.
So that just about wraps up our podcast. Have you got any closing remarks?
No, I think that's it. Just looking forward to Townsville this weekend. Should be a cracker. Nice to, the drivers will enjoy it, no doubt, being nice and warm. And you've got your gig in the up in the race control.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird having your home race coming up next, because you never really know quite whether it's like a good race or not, because you're always just like trackside, so you never really quite know what's happening. Is Townsville actually any good, or?
I do thoroughly enjoy watching it on TV, because you're always guaranteed a few little accidents here and there. Like we haven't really seen the big ones. Well, there was one
last year.
Was it last year, or was it one of the Nissans got T-boned?
Caruso ended up in those, like, the tyre barriers that are like in the middle of the grassed area down at it was either, I think it was at 11. Yeah, heading down towards the hairpin. That was weird, that accident.
Yeah, I just remember something like that. There was sort of one decent one, but we haven't had any like really massive ones. A couple of little pile-ups if someone gets turned into a wall and the next couple of cars sort of go crunching into them, but nothing massive. But again, like those little ones where if someone steps a bit wide and has a bit of an accident, side swaps the wall, they're the ones you sort of like to see. It spices it up a little bit.
I guess it's a very skinny circuit all the way around.
It is a bit like any road track. It's or street circuit. It's always going to be a little bit tighter than the others. So it's but it's always been. I haven't seen a dull Townsville race at all. So it's always been quite exciting. I think it's split fairly even. Like I think Tickford and Triple Eight would probably be the two most winning teams there. Over the last, since the start, really.
10 years, 11 years?
Yeah, so it's been there for a while now. I don't actually think DJR's won a race there.
Oh.
I'm trying to think if they...
I think Triple Eight had their turnaround at this time last year, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. They started doing better. So maybe 2017 McLaughlin might have got one, but I can't remember back that far. So they haven't had a lot of success there, put it that way. So I think they were close, but I don't think they've done a lot of winning there over the past couple of years anyway.
So that wraps us up. It'll be interesting to see whether DJR can get a win in Townsville.
They'll be short price favourites, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries, mate. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll see you all after Townsville. Have a good one.